we are going to talk about memory palace training routines, which are very, very important if you want to have your abilities to grow over time. And one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is that they simply do not practice enough. They don't practice consistently enough. And it's because they don't have a routine for practice. And you know, when you don't have a routine for practice, the evil Dr. Forget will get you. Wahahaha. And you don't want that. You want to be able to grow over time and see that growth, feel that growth, and actually have it re-engineer your brain, which is exactly what will happen. And if you are stuck with the memory palace technique, you're going to have some great ideas today for how to get a routine going for yourself and put it into action consistently over time so you actually start to have that growth. And you can sit down, work on your projects, focus on them, and learn and use that learning to do the most important thing of all, which is to create new knowledge, or at least be able to participate in existing knowledge in such a way that you make an impact, a difference in the world. Now, the first thing that we really have to get under wraps is something that is so obvious, and that is the mindset element of everything. Because a lot of people come to memory and memory improvement and training, and they're like, oh, this is so much work, and how am I going to have the time for this, and da 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 da. Like the endless sort of thing. And look, everybody has this in life. I have it. I look at certain things I have to do, and that thought and that mindset will come up. It's just normal, but you have to have strategies for it. And some of the strategies are actually knowing a little bit about how your mind works. So you can label the thoughts that come up. Am I having pain thoughts or am I having gain thoughts? Because one of the first things that you'll notice is that pain thoughts are a lot louder than gain thoughts in some areas of life. So you might be thinking, oh my God, I have to make a memory palace, and this guy talks about making even a whole memory palace network. Oh my God, that's so much work, right? Just notice that happening in your brain, and then think about the gain. Think about the gain. What if you actually had a fully functional memory palace network and you could just memorize information so quickly, and not only memorize it, but have it reliably there at your fingertips when you need it, or at least, you might trip a little across a couple letters, but you get there very, very quickly, and you actually not only remember what you know, but you remember that you remember it. This is very, very powerful. And if you could just focus on that gain, you might find that the blaring, bleeding, evil Dr. Forget pain message, it's so much work, just sort of like melts away because you focus on the actual outcomes, the benefits, the goals. So being able to actually speak the next time you see your family members that speak a different language, have a little chat with them. That would be a huge gain. You get to know them better. I love that I know my father-in-law so much better because of chatting almost daily with him. And it's just amazing. You don't get that if you just think about the pain of learning Chinese. If I sat around thinking about the pain of learning Chinese all day, never get anything done. Just focus on the gain. The gain is very, very important. And one of the things that really, really is so fascinating to me is that some of the smartest people in the world try to figure out memory techniques, and they're not actually just using them. Instead of just diving in, taking action, they will go through endless possibilities, endless probabilities, endless what if this, what if that, what if. And I was talking with a friend of mine, Nick, this morning, and he said, well, it's paralysis analysis. And I thought, no, I don't think it's paralysis. The problem is that they're not being paralyzed. If they're being paralyzed, it's that they're paralyzing the proper avenues of action, as opposed to just going down the proper avenues of action, right? So, or they're going down the wrong avenues of action, which is they're just endless labyrinth that builds. The more you think about this, the more potential things that you can potentially think about what if this and what if that and what if that happens and da 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 da. It's just like endless analysis of what this technique is about, instead of actually just understanding it through action. So in some sense, the higher the IQ you have and the more intelligence you bring to this, the more traps you can lay for yourself. Whereas what you want is the actual IQ or the AQ, action quotient, and understand it through action. And then you'll have many, many more tools in your Memory Palace training to explore, because you actually have some je ne sais quoi understanding of what it is that you are, what you're dealing with, because you've just had it in your hand. You don't know that you can't lift Thor's hammer until that you've actually had the handle in your grip. All right, so the most powerful cliche in the world for dealing with mindset and just getting things going is knowing your why, right? So what is the why that you need these techniques for? What is it? Do you want to become a memory champion, or do you just want to be an everyday person who is going to pass exams, who's going to learn languages? And then inside of that, is it that you want to be able to deal with a large volume of information, or are you concerned with the speed at which you're learning and retaining information? Or is it that you make the mistake of wanting things to be easy? There is no such thing as easy, even if these techniques are as easy as it gets, and there is paradoxically such a thing as easy. But easy isn't the way that Memory Palace training works, because if it gets so easy, what are you training for, right? Training requires challenge, and so you always want to be challenged. If you're truly interested in growing in anything, then you always have to bring challenge to the game. But you need to know your why, and that will help indicate, what it is that you're actually tackling, what it is you're training for, and the proper and precise role, insofar as you can be precise, that role of challenge in the mix. Because there's something we talk a lot about on this channel, which is the challenge frustration curve, which is very, very important to balance and manage, and to always have working in your favor in order to grow over time. So I can't give anybody their why, but some ways to think about the why is, what is the mission, right? So if you're learning a language, why are you learning the language? And is that why big enough? Have you put some time into establishing the portrait of the why that you're going to sit down, learn these techniques, and train yourself to use them really well? And a lot of people, they pick things that they don't have a big supportive why behind. And so then it makes it very, very difficult to set the missions and to even link the why that you have it to those missions, because there's no truth to the why. So you've always got to think about things being true and figuring that out. And one of the best ways to do that is to journal. And we'll talk a little bit more about journaling as we go along. But it's very, very interesting how that some people even struggle just to have a why. So one of the things that you want to do is start with a bucket list and think of the things you would like to do, and then just ask yourself, why would you like to do them? And then ask yourself again, why else? And try to do 5 why else's. And that'll help you create a hierarchy of the real things that you really want to do. Because if you can't figure out 5 reasons why you want to do a thing, what the heck are you doing bothering wanting to do it for? Do you really want to do it? And this kind of test will help you not waste time on Memory Palace training for things that you don't actually want to do, because your training is going to fall apart if you don't want to actually do any of those things. Same thing with professional terminology. You can sit there and have all the tools in the world and practice them, but if it's just a misery for you, well, what's the point? It's not the techniques that are going to give you the challenge frustration curve to balance out. It's going to be your lack of alignment with what it is that you want to do in life. Same thing with philosophy, like you may need to be studying continental philosophy instead of analytical philosophy, or vice versa, depending on your why and what you're truly passionate enough and interested about. Otherwise, what's the point of the tools? The whole point is that you want anything that provides immediate boosts or improvement and is linked to this larger governing sort of why are you doing something. And if you don't have that in place, then the role of training with these techniques in your life is very, very diminished, and it will give you frustration. And this is so simple to figure out, but as a general rule of thumb, I would suggest that you push for at least 5 reasons why before you start up anything. And if you don't have those 5 reasons, relax, go do something else. Go find something else that you do have 5 whys for. We shall call it the rule of the 5 whys. Here's the best way to structure your time. Set aside some time to create 1 memory palace per day. In less than a month, you'll have the minimum recommendation all together, ready to rock and roll. And then 5 to 10 times, heck, 1 item, if that's all that you can do, in a memory palace to memorize. That's just simple. But if you really want the real deal, then the minimum amount I suggest is the minimum amount. 1 memory palace a day if you can't do more. Most people, they're able in 2 to 5 hours over a weekend just to nail out their first memory palace network. But if you can't, no stress, just get it done 1 a day. Set the time. And it's so powerful and so precious to anyone who really cares about being able to learn effectively, efficiently, and much more quickly. You're not going to get away with 1 memory palace. You're not going to pop. You're not going to have this moment where all of a sudden, now I get it. Now I'm into it. Now I'm able to benefit from this. You've got to have multiple memory palaces. You've got to charge the spatial memory aspects that are involved here and have enough palette upon which to paint to use your autobiographical memory, your figural memory, your semantic memory with your episodic memory, and so on. So that's the first mission. The daily mini mission in terms of structuring your time would be to get the memory palace network done. Again, it's usually 2 to 5 hours. For most people, they can knock it out over a weekend or less. And it's a thing in progress, right? Like your first memory palace network is your first memory palace network. Then you create another one, another one, another one. Next thing you know, you're not really using tools to generate them. You're just generating them without the tools. The tools are just there for a couple of reasons that we'll talk about later that become useful in different respects, such as familiarity with alphabet lists and being able to have multiple alphabet lists. And those alphabet lists, there's no reason why most of them can't in some way be cross-indexed against a memory palace network, or fused with, not necessarily against it, but fused with a memory palace network. And so some of my favorite mini missions are some sort of card memorization and some time spent on a large project, both encoding it and recalling what that information is, and then just practicing recall rehearsal throughout the day. Now, in terms of structuring time, you've got just mental management. You could just do it manually. And in fact, it's a very, very good thing to do, a good thing to practice. But I don't entirely do things manually. I use the Freedom Journal, I use the Mastery Journal, I use them both. And I use a Snapshot Journal now, which I'm so glad that I discovered recently. And the Snapshot Journal is a lot of fun. And it makes it just like really brief. But it's a cool place to put, what it was that you did, and to have a record of it, and have a record that you're going to be able to compare over 5 years. All right, now, the other thing that's very cool, and I just mentioned it, is tracking results. But what does tracking results actually do? Well, it helps create self-monitoring. And that self-monitoring transcends just when you're sitting with your journal. It also gets into larger parts of your day, which is very, very good to be continually self-monitoring, which is one of the things that helps you make sure that you do sufficient recall rehearsal. And if you're having a hard time with self-monitoring, then that's where, heaven forbid you would let an app do this, but if you're going to use something like cards, then you can actually have these things visible in the room with you, and just make a rule that every time you pass your pile of cards, you're going to decode them, right? And one of the things that you can do with your decoding is, after you decode the cards, you can just shuffle them up. And you know what? You don't actually have to even pick them up, because if you can just do it in your mind, then you don't even have to go through them. And so you can progressively train yourself to release yourself from the technique. And I'm doing a bit of an experiment now with this. That's a lot of fun. I don't think it's any better or worse. It's just an alternative. And there's maybe a partial benefit in the actual act of drawing, is instead of putting it solely in the brain or creating it solely in the brain. But it's still the same old technique, just with an interstitial page, so to speak, on the form of a card. What about troubleshooting? You understand, you get it, you know that you have to train, you know that you have to structure your time, you know that you need to track your time, and you know that you're tracking your time is going to lead to many, many positive revelations about your practice. It's going to give you more enthusiasm and so forth. But you're still, yeah, great, common sense, wisdom, but it's not moving me. Well, one of the things you can do to troubleshoot this is to list or to mind map all of your objections. If you're still not able to start a Memory Palace training routine, what exactly is it? Get it out on paper. What is it? Is it mindset like what we talked about? Is it that you have, I don't know, you could have all kinds of things, like we'll talk about them in a minute, but what is it? Put it all out there. And then maybe you need to get some coaching. You need to get some, like a life coach or whatever, who through the combination of investment and someone listening to your BS and someone pointing out the nature of your BS, you finally have some revelations that help you move forward and do it consistently. That can be a huge thing for you. And then it's not necessarily an and or, but as a supplement to that, establish some accountability. There's a number of levels of accountability that you can learn about, and ideally a balance of at least the three major kinds can be very, very useful. And then communicate with people like we have the opportunity to do now here. And then, of course, you got to remove or manage distractions. So we've talked about, the internal issues of mindset and all kinds of things. If you've got lack of existing competence, then your number one goal is to get the competence. So if you don't have the proper Memory Palace network, if you don't have the proper use of magnetic imagery, if you don't have proper understanding and use of recall rehearsal, that's the goal. Get that stuff. Diet and sleep, etc. And then you have the external things like noise, lighting, time of day. Make sure that you tackle those things because you can troubleshoot them. And the reality is if you don't take care of that stuff, the evil Dr. Forget has you in his grips. And it's game over.